I would much rather be living in the past, but instead, I have to tell you what's to come. It's my duty to warn you of what the future may hold for you and your children, and what it means to lose the most precious gift you could ever have: freedom. The slave trade and prison industry will become one, and we will be the prisoners unless we stop this obedience and stop paying attention to what they tell us to do.
The United States prison industry and its use of recidivism and corporate policy is most likely the trial balloon for sustainable development goals. Unelected committee members who institute policy for your life simply can't ignore the success of this thriving human capital market. This success, however, will be our greatest downfall as human beings. Perhaps we should have paid attention to those activists who, for years, have been demanding humane treatment for prisoners.
In Sweden, there is a term, Allemansrätten, which translated means freedom to roam. This is so embedded in the Swedish heritage and way of life that it's incorporated into their constitution and the way they live their life. Freedom to roam as human beings is the foundational right that Swedes have. And when you build a constitution around those foundations, not only are you free as a human, but your government will protect that freedom. Even without the constitution, the philosophy that supports Allemansrätten is one that is seen in every class of society. If a traveler happens upon a private bit of land, for instance, he is allowed to set up camp and rest and revive himself, even if that property is privately owned. There is a deep connection to the true meaning of freedom in the Swedish culture, and this deep connection in their constitution. Within this deep connection to the true meaning of autonomous freedom also comes a deep respect for the earth and the value the earth's restorative elements can have on the human race. It is in these restorative moments that you can heal yourself and allow your mind and body to wander and find restitution and hope, which will birth ideas that can change your economy, your culture, and the very way you live your life. But this can only come when you roam freely, restore yourself, and change within. This is what it means to be human, to not only enjoy the beauty of nature and all its gifts, but to find balance within ourselves from the restorative properties of the earth itself. Even in Sweden's, and Denmark's, and Norway's prison systems, there is freedom and a deep respect for humans incarcerated in those prisons. Unlike the United States, their prisoners don't wear uniforms, are not used as legal chattel, and are treated with dignity, often working off their prison sentence on farms. Some work the land and some work with animals and go through steps to rehabilitate. This is because that philosophy of Allemansrätten believes that every human has the right to the land, no matter what his crime. Unfortunately, the United States has a different viewpoint. Our leadership feels the open spaces where people wander should be financialized and privatized, and that only those with money or influence should be given the luxury to have access to the thing which the Swedes believe belongs to everyone. We've seen legislation right now that Joe Biden's 2021 administration is attempting to pass. access to the common spaces or open land is going to be handed off to the highest bidder in the interest of climate change. So, as we transition into neo-humanism and redefine what it means to be human, you might find yourself having difficulty accessing your favorite hiking spot or your favorite spot on the river or near the ocean. And through your electronic enslavement, you may not even be allowed to have access to these things at all. This is why, when the foundation for a constitution is the free market instead of the free self, it can only end in enslaving a population made poor and marginalized through that very free market which boasts a false sense of freedom. After all, the 13th Amendment in the Constitution allows for the legalization of slavery through the prison industry. This is why the U.S. has the highest prison population on the planet. This constitutional protection of the free market allows the industry to capture and incarcerate human beings and throw them into modern-day slavery. This is why all the policies and legislation set forth in the Fourth Industrial Revolution will be behavioral driven. Your access to your own freedom will be based on how you behave versus whether you follow rules or laws in your local community or local municipality or local governments. This is why children are not being taught anything in school. They are not getting an education. They are being trained how to behave. And since humans are not machines, their behavior in the future will be punishable and they will be future slaves. There are investments made to short out their freedom and their life and throw them into an enslaved, indebted life. And they will most likely never experience the freedom to roam and explore. We are living in a prison cell of our own making, redefining our own human experience, forgetting what it's like to wander and be human. As prisoners enslaved to a behavioral-driven market that can only keep feeding itself as long as we are impoverished or misbehaving, there is no incentive to ratify the 13th Amendment. Why would there be? Corporations and tech companies need us digitized and punished to place us back into this new, upgraded prison system that is our own world, so they can keep the slave trade legal and continue to make profit. When this is codified in a constitution, it's time to either rewrite the Constitution or abandon it altogether and embrace fully the language and life of Allemansrätten.
We are being taught that we are not human. We are simply batteries that make the machine go. What is the machine that you will be powering? What requirements do you have in order to be the battery? The machine is every part of the medical, education, and housing industry you will be invested in as human capital. The data harvested from all of us will turn us into the batteries that run the future economy of debt finance, social impact investment, and performance-based contracting.
If you stop people from thinking and you change the way they see themselves, and you make them feel like they can't have power or they don't have any power, then it's easier to control them.
Each aspect of these various industries needs you to be poor or dependent on them in order for these industries to qualify for funding and improvement. In order to keep these machines running, you have to be poor. You have to be uninformed about who is financing them. You have to be kept in the dark about what their mission is. Since its very inception, Capitalism has relied on the exploitation of people and built itself and its power in the world through slavery. And the only reason the slave trade went away when it did is because the provenance and tracking of chattel could not be tracked or guaranteed accurately or thoroughly enough for the investors and the underwriters of human capital to know what they were getting as a return on their investment. With the advent of digital tracking through blockchain ledger technology and artificial intelligence, every person, everything a person does, every health issue, every transaction, every transgression can be tagged and traced on the ledger.
Transformed into slaves legally and the exploitive ways the prison industry operates are obvious. This new model of transforming a free society into a prisoner is subtle and goes unnoticed by the innocent, average, freedom-loving American. Privacy has been trained out of you through social media. The introduction of social media into our daily lives was another trial balloon to indoctrinate us into normalizing full spectrum dominance and the monitoring of our lives. Your Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages are now extensions of yourself, or your digital twin, as some people say.
The idea of nudge was developed by Professor Cass Sunstein and Richard Thaler in 2008 in their book entitled Nudge. Nudge is a system of gentle encouragements based on advanced knowledge of the decision-making process. The benefits of nudge? Remarkable power to change behaviors through cost-effective actions.
Your behavior on these social media platforms can not only be monitored, but also nudged, just like a prisoner's behavior is nudged and made. The prison system makes angry people by putting them into unfamiliar situations and prison communities that are too far for their family to visit, or there are judicial practices and systems in place that are foreign to the prisoner.
We can apply this mechanism into our social media presence as well, where the foreign landscape can nudge us into engaging in online fights or behavioral-driven responses that set us up to be targeted and punished. How many times in your life have you been complicit in your own enslavement and given in to their immoral and dangerous commands just to go along to get along and not draw unwanted attention to yourself? If you capitulate and say yes to this right now, then chances are you will capitulate and say yes to much worse in the future. And the message you are sending to the children who look up to adults for guidance is that you have not only forsaken whatever God you worship, but you have forsaken your own humanity, and you are encouraging them to do the same. You are teaching them to be afraid of the human face, and by extension, the human race.
What is being built, a prison is being built in this country, and who ends up in that prison? Well, maybe we all do, but we'll certainly say future generations are going to end up in that prison, and the children of the police in this country, their own parents, their fathers, their mothers who work with the police are helping to build that prison system. And I think that's the saddest thing.
This tells us that our society is no longer supported by individual thought and sovereign mind or sovereign landscape. Our society is now behavioral driven. In a behavioral driven society, there is no room for education, analysis, questioning authoritarian narratives, and certainly no room for freedom to move about as an individual. In this neo-human landscape, we are prisoners. We must conform to the behavior in order to be free. But unlike prisoners who do get early release for good behavior, we do not. This is a never-ending cycle that reminds us that our behavior is bad, and we must always conform in tighter and more oppressive ways until there is nothing left of us. Prisoners are tracked and traced, monitored and controlled. Every moment of their lives is not their own. Everything they do, everything they eat, every conversation they have is open. And private thoughts, feelings, or experiences are trained out of their existence. Ironically, this acceptance of oppressive surveillance is the excuse given to guarantee their freedom. This classic dichotomy presented as fair treatment can only exist in fascism.
High-paying manufacturing jobs that were shipped overseas in order to save money on labor costs have come back to America, but only because now cheap prison labor that only pays a prisoner a few cents per hour allows the corporations to again make the kinds of profits they left the U.S. for in the first place. These jobs that might as well be considered slave labor do nothing to help the people forced to do them, and in fact, further financialize them through the exploitation of their labor and their inability to make the kind of money they need to get out of debt, pay their fines and legal fees, which places an even larger financial burden on their families outside, waiting for them to return.
You could be spreading the coronavirus without realizing you have it, so do your part and stay home.
We are now all considered prisoners. Although we haven't been labeled as such, we are being treated that way. The mask requirements, the stay-at-home orders and curfews are all training us to behave differently, deferential, keeping us in our place, in our homes. The important point here is that, like today, we will be paying for everything we need to live, our food, our clothing, the place where we live. But now we will also have to pay for the place we work. The cost of real estate and rent for offices and spaces to produce things or sell products, the cost of labor, and the cost of infrastructure that people use to move around are eating into profits. Malls, stores, offices, and places where people gather and socialize will go away. They're not seen as essential for doing business. Just as the wage slave model replaced human capital slavery, the new system will replace wage slavery, and we will once again be part of a human capital market. But this time, we won't be working on a plantation or a farm, and we won't be sent away to faraway prisons. We will be isolated in our own homes, working on digital service platforms while being told that we are working for ourselves. In reality, we'll pay money to the service platform owners for the opportunity to find the low-paying work they offer, and even if we don't work on a computer, but provide in-person services like plumbing, cutting hair, or making deliveries, we'll still be on some sort of digital platform.
These platforms and services, which can easily be converted to this model, already exist. Guru.com, TaskRabbit, Uber, Angie's List, and others will be how we get work and make a living. But we will be in competition with other people around the world, bidding on jobs that come along based on low price rather than quality work. But at the same time, these jobs will require constant updates in authenticated training and education, which will often cost more than what a worker makes through the gig jobs they do get. The financialization of the poor in the past is a blueprint for what's to come for all of us in the future. And that future will be what was done before, only on steroids. It will be run on behavioral blockchain currency. Everyone will be tracked, monitored, and recorded into a blockchain ledger. through artificial intelligence software, our interests, our behaviors, what we eat, how much we eat, where we go, what we like, where we live, what we do for work or not do for work. Everybody's lives will be recorded and used for predictive behavior modeling that will be used for social credit scoring and prescribed behavior management. These behaviors will determine the kinds of programs that are created and invested in. And these programs are the same type of preferred provider wraparound service that are implemented in poor communities, which create an endless cycle for the need of those services. Because if investors can make money from services that are always needed, money is made and the incentive for investment continues. We will become human capital and will be the batteries of the future economy. All of us, from young to old, will constantly have our social and health behavior tracked and recorded into a blockchain ledger. Your behavior will be a prediction of what kind of person you are. Will you work hard and behave well, eat healthy food and get enough sleep? Or do you drink excessively, take drugs, or act out in public? What will be deemed as good behavior will be rewarded through incentives and opportunities, but the opposite is true as well. The funds in your digital currency account can be shut off, or you could be flagged and prevented from moving about freely. And just as the investments are made to ensure good behavior, we will be shorted, bet against by hedge fund investors that we won't behave correctly. Roadblocks could be put into place by the investors betting against you. For example, incorrect information on a transit app which makes you miss the bus may keep you from getting to work on time or meeting community service requirements. These mistakes, whether they're your fault or not, will be recorded into your ledger, negatively affecting you, but the hedge fund investor betting against you will make money as a result.
So you see, the war that has been waged on the poor by keeping them poor and marginalized through the court system, through traffic citations, arrests, the prison system, and the services provided through nonprofits and preferred providers will be done to the rest of our society. That's why it's so important to recognize that this is a class war. But not only is it a class war, it's a war on humanity. And we will be rewarded or punished based on our behavior and exploited based on our health. The new normal that everyone refers to is not normal, it's immoral. The neo-humanism or new version of yourself will not have you locked in what you would consider a prison cell. Instead, you will be a prisoner of debt and really more of a slave. You will be the capital, the means in which the wealthy investment class make their money. Some of us will make enough through our employment to get by, but will need to go into debt to pay for upgrading our education. This will likely be done through investors loaning you the funds and then taking a percentage of your earnings for a few years until that loan is paid off. But it won't end there. You'll need to continue your education throughout your life, especially if you want to keep your job or get a better one. The cost of working will keep you in debt, and you'll need to keep working to pay off that debt.
And it's a way of packaging people as debt commodities, essentially, using data analytics and predictive analytics to imagine people as a burden on society. It's a deficit model.
Sound familiar? We have a similar situation today in which we are tied to jobs in order to pay off loans for houses or cars or credit cards. But the situation will be much different in the future because in the scenario we're describing, you may pay for that education to keep your job, but that job may not be yours to have. You'll need to compete with others or reapply in order to keep it. And if you lose that job, that too will go on your record. We'll always be on the hook for something. Others of us, although employed, will not earn enough to cover everything and will need programs created through public-private partnerships and the wraparound services that come with those programs. From there, the state, the nonprofits, and investors can use your dependence on those programs and services to make more money. Not for you, but for themselves, and it's a never-ending cycle of dependence and growth potential for the industry which feeds on you. However, all of us will be tracked and traced through various technologies that may be wearable devices or on-the-street surveillance via artificial intelligence, geofencing, and facial recognition technology, or even nanotechnology that will be in our own bodies, connecting us to the Internet of Bodies.
You know, I was speaking with someone earlier and they were talking about thingification. The human beings are being turned into things. We're being thingified in essentially a global panopticon, and that our misery is quantified. And then in this amelioration of it, the misery will be reduced somewhat. And in that space in between full-blown misery and slightly reduced misery, the person who funds the solution to that reduced misery gets paid back for their investment if the data shows on a dashboard.
We will be kept track of via blockchain ledgers that record all transactions, all interactions, all movement, all behavior, and all health information. Like people in prison, you will have no privacy. You will be forced into situations in which you have no choice for where you live or what you do for work. Your personal space will be reduced to the minimum. It will be shared with your workspace, and you will have to pay for it.
We hope this video essay has helped you see how the prison system has been the model by which our lives will be lived from now on. Because all we have to do is look to the past to know our future. After all, in the past, slaves and later prisoners worked the land and built the infrastructure of the U.S. They had no choice in what they did, where they did it, or for how long. They were the human capital of the past. And like them, we are all going to be the human capital of the future for companies, nonprofits, services, and systems that without you would be starved out of existence. So we must resist this and refuse to participate, as some slaves and prisoners of the past did when they revolted and escaped. The country of Haiti, for instance, was once a French colony, and the only slave colony that revolted and successfully kicked out their masters to have sovereignty over themselves. But the Haitian Revolution was a message to the current special interests that want all of the planet enslaved in service to them. Through tracking us down in every situation in our life, they will never let such a revolution happen again. We can see this with all the tracking technology, the recent mask and distancing mandates which are designed to train us to behave, and with all the marketing of personal devices and wearable technology. Escape is not possible. The ruling class won't allow any opportunity for their chattel to escape, misbehave, wander away, or stop working. They will party like it's $14.99. The slave trade and prison industry will become one, and we will be the prisoners unless we stop this obedience and stop paying attention to what they tell us to do. We still have an opportunity to stop the war on humanity.